Greetings and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we will be doing some gameplay from the game Steamroller Tannenberg 1914. This is from Yaah magazine, issue number 10, which was featured in the most recent episode of Midweek magazine. This will be just as I said, a gameplay video. So we will be going through the game and pretty straightforward, not a really difficult game or complicated game. And so we have everything set up here. Now the Germans are the gray units here, and the Russians would be the other units, the kind of light brown tan color here. And you can see the border, the red line here is the border between the Germans and the Russians. So that would be the border as it existed prior to the First World War. This was early in the First World War. So we are going to, as I said, take a look at the gameplay for this game. Our turn track is over here. We've got reinforcements on here, and we're going to go through everything as we play. So we are on game turn number 1 here, and we're going to get things going. Okay, what I'd like to do is go over a few things before we actually start playing. So here's our game turn marker. And as you can see, it says Russian strategic momentum on one side. The other side, of course, as you might expect, would say German strategic momentum. And on the game turn the game turn track here, you can see it says the HL team takes command, and there's a 1, and then it gradually, the range gets higher as you go towards the end of the game. That represents the team of Hindenburg and Ludendorff coming in to take over command of the German 8th Army. Now, in game, it's going to be, you're going to draw a card for the Germans, and if the number is within the range on the board for the turn track, they will come into the game, which would give the Germans permanent strategic momentum. But at the beginning, it starts with the Russians. This was a Russian offensive that started this battle. So we're going to put that there for that. Now, to talk about the units here, so let me just pick this guy up. So here we have a German unit. The 2 boxes there indicate the size of the unit. Okay, then the A on the left of the infantry symbol, that indicates its morale, experience, training, or MET rating, as the game rules call it. So basically, it's just the quality of the unit. So A being the best, and D is the worst. So an A would be an elite unit, while D would be, your basic like reserves, conscripts, kind of, not particularly good, militia, untrained, etc., stuff like that. And then you see the gun symbol there beside the infantry symbol on the right. That means this unit's supported by heavy infantry, and that's reflected in the numbers below. So the numbers across the bottom, the 3 is its rifles rating. So that represents, a 4 would represent marksman quality, while a 1 is poorly trained shooters. So this is 3. So as you would expect from an elite unit, they are pretty good. The middle unit is their machine gun rating. This represents the relative total number of machine guns deployed with the unit. A 4 is an abundant number, while a 1 represents very few. And then on the right, we have the artillery rating. So again, a 4 is numerous batteries are supporting, while a 1 means a nominal or minimal number are present. So that is what the counters mean. Now you have some larger units in terms of size. Like here we have the Russian 4th Corps, which, as you can see, has a size of 5. Quality is B. But even though the troops themselves are relatively well trained, you can see their ratings are pretty low, 2, 3, 2. So that's not great, but I hope that was where they were. I forget if they were here or here now. I'm going to leave them there. Anyway, you do have multiple types of units. We have plenty of infantry, as you would expect. We also have some cavalry here, and there are special rules for the cavalry. Now, you can see these are all set up face up. Now, if you were playing 2-player, which I'm not, so I have to make a few adjustments for that. On this side here, you can see cavalry scouting, so they can be put on a scouting mission. But a regular unit, such as this guy here in Augustov, is a member of the First Army, and you don't know what it is. So you have fog of war. And there are rules for how they reveal, and some of those involve the scouting of the cavalry. You also have hidden units, which are denoted by these false report counters. So you can put these out as well, and they would be on the unknown side, so you wouldn't necessarily know what they are. All the German units are 8th Army, so that's why there's no Army indicator on here. But that, these would be out, like, say, you had one here or something. Then the Soviets, I want to call them Soviets, not yet, Russians, wouldn't know what that was. The Soviet player, I did it again. The Russian player would not know who those are. All right, get my head out of World War II. Then we have casualty markers, right? So that's in here in a draw cup, and they have two sides. And you can see this is light casualties. So you can see it gets a -1 for size, and then a -1 on both artillery and rifle. And then the other side would be heavy casualties, which would be 2. And this is how you basically take step losses, essentially. So those go in a cup, and then when there's fighting, you draw it out and see whether you got heavy casualties or light casualties. There are also activated markers, such as this, which you use to indicate that a unit is activated. Therefore, you can keep track of how many units you have. The turns are, each turn represents, I think it was 4 days, and yes, 4 days. First turn is August 15th through the 18th. And inside those are different, basically pulses, kind of, where it alternates between the sides. There's also a German planned operations, and this can kind of move between sides. And when the Russians have it, it just means that the Germans can't do planned operations. But event, and there's an event table, which is right here. So when you get a combat card, and these are the combat cards, the Germans have a deck and the Russians have a deck. Some of those have the word event on those, and then you would need to check the chart here. So there are some more rules for that as well, but you can see somewhere in here is where the Germans would get their planned operation back, as amongst other things. So this is kind of a little bit of that chaos of war that you would want in a game. And then control, there are also control markers. There's this to indicate control of a city. You can see you've got German on one side, Russian on the other side. The Russians also have these, their activation chits are double-sided. You have activated First Army, activated Second Army. They're color-coded. The green is the First Army, which are all basically from here up, kind of on the eastern edge. The First Army is kind of down here. There isn't a lot of it on the map yet. They have a lot of reinforcements over here, but they're kind of in this area down here to the south of where Prussia was kind of bulging into. And this is all really kind of like Poland, but it was bulging into Russian territory. So, well, I shouldn't say all of this. This is Prussia, which is now, some of it is in Belarus and some of it is in Poland. But at this time, the Polish areas were down in this area down below to the south. So sequence of play, it's on the player aid card. So we can take a quick look now. You have Russian and German on the same sheet. It's also on the back of the magazine, so you do have 2 copies of this. But you can see up here, you've got reinforcements, then initiative deck setup, German railroad movement, etc., all the way through. Okay, so until you've got this bid initiative card. For the Russians, you would select either the First or Second Army to activate, unless using the planned event chit. Then you've got the action round, and so on down through here. The Germans are pretty similar. I think they are just exactly similar, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. because the Germans can bring in Western Front. Is that on here as well? No. So basically, what we're going to do is you have initiative cards. So the Germans have, both sides have 6 of these. Those are the Germans, these are the Russians. Now, because I'm playing solitaire, what you're supposed to do is, these cards all have a value on them. Between, I think, 1 and 4, if I remember correctly. I don't want to look because I've shuffled these. So what I was planning on doing, because I'm playing solitaire, is to just kind of flip these over at the same time, take the top card of both decks, reveal. The Germans have a 2 and the Russians have a 2. Now, in the event of a tie, actually, I forgot, you're supposed to, like I said, there are 6, there are 5 rounds in a turn, so they're both going to lose. That you remove the top card. I do dig the artwork on these, though. That's pretty nice. So we're going to discard those guys, and then we'll take the top cards from both again and reveal, and it's again a tie. So in the event of a tie, you get what is called a lull in the action, which says if the players both play equal bid numbers, a lull in the action occurs. This reflects historical factors such as bad weather, fatigue, confusion, etc. The allowed actions is automatically won and earned only by the player with the current strategic momentum. The other player does not get any actions this round. So the strategic momentum, as I already mentioned, belongs to the Russians. So they get an action and the Germans do not. Now, before the bid, there was actually a German railroad movement phase that I did not do. I'm choosing not to do it. But the way that works, in case I don't get to it, because I don't know how long this will take, but the way that works is you get 4 movement points that correspond to the size of the units. So let's say this guy's on a railroad. I can move him along the railroad, and that would use up 2 of my points because his size is 2. And down here we have another unit that also is a 2. He could also use the railroad to move because that would be the other 2. You have a total of 4, and that's all you can use. Okay, so then we go to the action round phase. And typically it would be performed in 2 steps, where the initiative player, the one that had a higher card, so let's say the Russians played a 4 and the Germans played a 2. That would be an advantage of 2 for the Russians. The Russian player would automatically get 2 actions to start the round, and then the German player would go, and they'd alternate. So basically what happens when you win initiative, you end up playing first and last in that turn. So, or in that round, rather. So that works out pretty well. And there's obviously strategy on, do I want to play my 4? Do I want to play a 2? Etc. I think the way the cards are, it's there's more of certain ones and fewer of others. So once we do this, now we have to say, okay, so the Russians have their action. They have they can only activate units from one of their 2 armies. So this is kind of a command restriction on the Russians. Their command and control was not as good as the Germans, but the Germans also only had the 1 army out in the field. Russians had 2. So the Russians can only activate the first army, which is the green guys, or the second army, the blue guys, and they can only do 1 per action round. So since this one is the bigger one, I would think that would be the one they would want to activate. And you only really get to activate 1 unit. Like one unit can be activated. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we don't really have any Russian units that can actually attack the Germans right now because nobody's adjacent. So if you're adjacent to an enemy unit, like let's just say this lake was not in between these 2, and they're cavalry anyway, so let's pretend they're infantry, because infantry has typically better firepower. So if these were adjacent, they are adjacent, but we have a lake between them, so the lake is impassable. They cannot. That kind of defeats the purpose here. They could attack each other in one of two ways. They could do a firepower attack, which is just, I'm shooting at you from afar, basically, or they're adjacent. But again, the scale of this map, this is a fairly big chunk of land that we're seeing here. So even though they're adjacent, this isn't like a tactical game where you could just kind of, you're really close to each other, a couple hundred yards or whatever it may be. In this case, there's a little distance, even though they're adjacent. So they can do a firepower attack, which just doesn't involve any movement. They could also do an assault attack where they would be attacking with the intention of taking that hex. And then so there's two different ways to resolve those combats. But right now we don't actually have anything. So what we would do in this case is we would move. I would think we're going to move somebody. So now you have to decide what you want to do in terms of movement. So one unit may move normal movement, and cavalry can use this to go to their scouting side, or from the scouting side to the deployed side. So they're on their deployed side right now. They could go to their scouting side, which counts as a move. So let's say I wanted to make this second cavalry here scout. I flip it over. I can't then say, well, he's going to move here. You can't move. The flip counts as the move. So we won't do that for now. One thing I also should mention before we start doing this is in some games you have zones of control. I'm sure everybody, or mostly everybody, depending on your wargaming experience, has encountered games with zones of control. And here we have no man's land, which basically operates in a very similar manner. So if this rifle brigade here, I think that's what that says, isn't it? Yeah, rifle brigade. It's a little far away from where I'm standing. If I moved him here, he would now be in the no man's land next to this unit and have to stop. But this one here, it's basically the same as you would think in a zone of control. You have potentially a no man's land in all six. You wouldn't be able to extend it here because of the water. But let's say this, even this unit here, if he wanted to move here, and we'll talk about terrain in a minute. He could move there from Augustove to Leik, could move here, and there's no enemies around, so he could continue to move, basically. Okay, so in terms of movement allowance, every unit has three hexes, but you have terrain. So like here, with all the dotted lakes, that's marsh. You also have forest, obviously, and you have elevation. Elevation does not matter for movement, but does matter for combat, and we'll get to that as well. So we could take this guy, and if he moved here, that counts as 2. Then if he moved here, that would only be 1. So that would be 3, and that would be his entire movement. So let's just say we're going to do that. That'll be our move. Now you would put the activated marker on there to indicate that he had been played, and we would then, if this were a normal turn instead of a lull, we would, depending on the difference, again, we would possibly have more actions to do for the Russians, and then it would go to the Germans, and they would move. And so you're activating one unit at a time, unless you have a larger than 1 advantage on your initiative card. Then you would possibly have 2, or you would have 2 basically. I think the biggest difference is 2. I think. So that would actually be the end of this turn, and I did not check yet to see. So to check for Hindenburg and Ludendorff, you take a German combat card and you flip it. And this one actually says event, but I think you use this number up here, which is a 1. I believe that's what you do. I'm going to confirm that in the rules. I know it's a number on here, but you can see, in addition to the event, which means we'd have an event check, but I don't think that counts for this because this is not we're not using it for combat. We're just using it to check on the arrival of the German commanders. You've got all these different attacks, and you can see what you get numbers, basically. So an attack number and a defense number. So the Germans, if they were attacking, would use this or this for firepower or assault. And then if they were defending, because the Russians were attacking, they would use defense or defense, depending again on whether it's firepower or assault. This gives you your numbers that you would use to determine, based on the difference between the two, would tell you how many. It would give you a result of the combat, and we will do this um, at some point. So let me check real quick to see if we're using this number, which I think we are, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, yes. Unfortunately for the Russians, that number 1 came up right away. So this is going to get flipped on the next turn. So once we get to turn 2, which is going to be right now, because again, this was a lull in the action. The Russians had 1 activated unit there. So I'm going to discard this combat card. And next, after our action rounds, you would remove the activation markers. So that was kind of a dud, a lull in the very first turn is kind of, or very first round of the first turn. We still have more cards, so we still have 4 rounds to go. You can see the Germans have 4 initiative cards, as do the Russians. But at the end of the turn phase, which is after the 5th initiative card, there are other things to do. So since this is not, we go back to the bid initiative card. Okay, unless the last card was just bid, which it isn't. So I'm going to take the top 2 again. Picked up 2 German cards. 1 second. Here we go. We flip. I swear I shuffled these. I don't know how this is happening. But again, we're going to have a lull. And again, the Russians still have initiative, so they will get 1 turn. And I should not have pulled this off. That's what you do at the end of the turn. So they have been used, basically, if you want to look at that as ops complete, used, or whatever, from other games. Then that's what those guys are. So let's move another unit up. And I think what we will do is we'll take this guy and we're going to move him here. And again, I'll put a marker on there. And we'll draw our 3rd card for this turn. And this time we have a difference. The Germans have a 3, the Russians have a 2. So there are more 2s than there must be 2 3s and at least 2 2s, because they have a 2 here, and there's 2 cards left. So the Germans win initiative, and they have only a difference of 1, so they still only get 1 activation, and then the Russians will get an activation. And I think then the Germans get another activation, because the side that wins initiative always gets the first and last action, if I remember that correctly. But they only get to go once. So they get to go once, then the Russians will go, and then the Germans will go again. I believe that's how it is intended to work. And again, I'm sure that our friendly game designer and or game developer will probably watch this video and let me know how much I have messed it up. Hopefully not too bad. Not too bad. But both Herman and Fred are great guys, and they will certainly point me in the right direction. Anyway, so the Germans get to move, and let's see what we want to do here. This is a fortress, rather. I almost said forest. It's the Lützen fortress, and you can see the unit here is the fort unit, and they cannot be activated until a Russian unit moves adjacent or attacks them, I believe, is the rule there. So let's see. Let's take this guy and let's do a combat. So, well, we'll get to a combat because we can only do a movement, and then you have to be adjacent to do a firepower combat. So if we move him here, and we put an activated on him, then the Russians would get to go. And let's move. Now your stacking limit per hex is 8. So you can see we've got 5 here and 2 here. So if I were to move him here, that would make it 7, which is still good. The problem is there's a river here. That's clear terrain though, so he could go 1, 2, 3 and stop there. Now, looking at the map really quick, because I didn't mention this either, the red here, red cities, these are cities. Red indicates it's a city. Black indicates it's a town. So you can see here Gumbinnen is red, so it's actually a city, which means the Germans need to hold it. Let me mark this guy as activated. Okay, and the Russians taking German towns is how they gain victory points. So what I was going to do was I was going to see if I could move some units into place for an attack. And I can actually attack if I want to here with this unit, which is sitting right here. It's across a river, so that would be if we were to try to assault, I guess. Or I could just move this unit or even this unit into here. This is not a super strong unit, but it's not terrible either. 232 is not that bad. But since this guy's a 444, maybe we should attack there, just so I can show you what an attack looks like. Okay, so let's do a firepower attack. So both sides will take a combat card from the top and flip them simultaneously. Now we do have an event, so let me talk about how the firepower attack works, and then we'll go through the event stuff. So here we have the firepower attack. Okay, let's look at the Germans first. They're going to use firepower attack, which is right here. So you can see they get one hit if the rifle is 3 or 4, and in this case, it's a 4. They get one hit if the machine gun is 3 or 4, and again, it's a 4. So they're up to 2 hits. And then another hit if they have heavy artillery, which they do. So that equals 3 hits. Now we look at the Russian defensive card, and they get -2 if heavy cover and -1 if medium cover. They are in open terrain. Okay. Let me check to see if the attack across the river counts as cover. I think it might. So no, rivers only affect assault combat, but I wanted to talk about the event here. So you can see the Germans drew a card with an event. The Russians did not. If both sides had an event, we would get an event. So that did not happen, therefore, no event. Okay, so now the Germans have their second activation, and that ends that round, and we go to the next round. Each side has 2 cards left. We're going to draw 1. And the Germans drew a 4, and the Russians drew a 2. So the Germans get 2 actions, and then they will get they will again go to the Russians for an activation, and then back to the Germans. So in this case, we will say, let's see, let's move this unit, right? He's just going to move to Gumbinnen here, and that's all I'm going to do with that, right? He's not going to, well, he couldn't move anyway any further. He could go here, theoretically, because you can do a move from one no man's land hex to another if there's already a friendly unit there, because actually maybe not, because there might have to be another one here as well. Because by moving into this, you're adjacent to an enemy unit. And I forgot to do the hits. So we draw 3. He took 3 hits because he had no cover. So I'm going to pull 3 casualty chits out of here. You can see here that they're not all the same, right? So that's 3 step losses. Let me check this for a second, because I'm not sure I'm doing that right. Okay, so I drew out 2 and threw 1 back, because what's going to happen is one of them will get flipped to the 2 casualty side. And then this one would be 1. So you'd have a total of 3. But they can also elect to retreat 1 to remove one of the 3 hits. So we will do that. So he's going to retreat 1. And maybe he'll retreat here. Let's retreat him there. And so he will still have his activated marker, which I pulled off and put over here. So I'm going to leave that there for the moment. And so now you've got these 2 that will go on top that will indicate his current situation. So he's taken 3 step losses. So that 5 is now a 2. He's also taken 3 losses to his MET rating, which is now going to be a D. And then he's got a -2 on rifle, a -1 on machine gun, and a -1 on artillery. So he's in rough shape. He's in rough shape. And we're going to put that there and stick that on top. And if he had taken actually, no, what am I doing? This one does not count. He's only got 2 hits. So it's not quite as dire as I made it out to be, but he does have 2 hits here on his marker. So he's down to 3 size. He has gone from a B to a D, and then he's a 1, 2, 1 for his ratings. Okay, so now the Russians can go again. And let's activate the second army. So we got these 2 right here. And I'm going to move this guy 1, 2. Actually, no, that counts as 2. So he's going to go there. And I'm going to put his marker on here. Now the Germans, they have 1 more activation. Did I do 2 actions? I thought I only did 1. Oh, I did the attack and I did the movement, right? I think I confused myself here. Sorry. We're just going to move this guy up 1 to that spot right there. And I will put an activated marker on there. And for our final round, it's Russians 4, Germans 2. So now the Russians have a 2 advantage. And they will get 2 activations. Then the Germans will get 1. And then the Russians will get a 3rd one. Yeah, I screwed that up too. The Russians will get 4 actions. The Germans will get 2 actions. So the Russians get 2, which would leave them with 2. Then the Germans will take 1. The Russians will take their 3rd. The Germans will take their 2nd. And the Russians will take their 4th. That's how it works. So you only have 4 activated markers per side. This was the counter sheet. So it's a half sheet, so there are a ton of counters. So what I did was I pulled out some spares here, and I have some gray colored ones that I'll use for the Germans, and I have some brown ones that are literally brown that I'll use for the Russians. I didn't really have that many. I think I might only have 1 that color, so I wanted to have a little more flexibility. Okay, so we moved 1. Now we're going to move another. And again, we can only activate on this activation the 2nd army. So let's move this guy here. We'll move him 1. Actually, I don't know that I want to do that. We want to bring in we get a bunch of reinforcements here in turn 2. So we're going to say he's going to go, we have to be careful not to get stuck up in there. We go 1, 2, 3. Or we could have gone 2, 3, and it would have been the same thing because this is broken terrain. So I'm going to put one of my brown markers on him. And so they've got a few left, a lot of cavalry that hasn't moved. But now that they've gone twice, the Germans get to go once. So let us do, if we cross the river, we should probably start to move somebody down in this area. They're in broken terrain. So let's move. I'm going to move this guy right here. So just put a stop to them. Drop that on there. Now we go back to the Russians. Let's move this one here. And then the Germans will move here. And I think that's it. I'm just going to leave them there in that city. We'll try to get over here to Eylau. And then the Russians get their final turn, and we're going to move. He can cross the river and go here into that, which is forest, which will give him a little bit of a defensive bonus. And that would be the end of the turn. Both sides are out of initiative cards. So this would be the end of the first turn. Now, because I like to keep my videos relatively short, I wanted to just show assault so you could see what that looks like. So let's just say if we go, okay, so briefly, this is how assault combat works. Now, because as I said, I'm playing the game solitaire, so I'm not using the full rule set. So there are rules for if you attack a false report unit, you still resolve it because the attacker could theoretically take some casualties from that action, and then the false report unit is pulled off. So again, that's Fog of War, and that's really, really cool, and it's great for the 2-player, which is the actual game. I'm playing kind of a, I'm playing my own way a little bit to not have to add the complexity of the false report because I'm playing against myself, so I would know what units are what anyway. I would probably be able to remember. Anyway, let's say that this unit and one of these Russians, I don't know, maybe this guy, we're going to do assault combat against each other, right? So we have a 3-4-4 A with artillery against a 2-2-1 A without artillery. The size is, one's a brigade, the other is larger than a brigade. So we're gonna, if we were assaulting, right, and let's say this was the situation right here. Let's say he's here and we have a unit here as well. They could both, if you had 2 activations, or if you had the planned operation, you could assault with both. And then if they had more than 1 unit in here and you're attacking with more than 1 unit, or from stacking or whatever, if there are multiple units on each side, you pair them up 1-to-1. And then if anything that's left over, they get a second bite of the pie, so to speak. But in general, you would also get a flanking bonus because these two are both adjacent to the targeted hex, but they're not adjacent to each other. So let's just, so we would again draw combat cards. This guy was here, I think. You would again, or maybe up here. I forget now. I think he might have been up there. Anyway, you would both draw a card, right? And then you would use the assault area, right? So if the Germans were assaulting, if he's an A, he gets 1 hit. If it's a rifle, is 1-to-4, which almost all of them are. Unless they take casualties, that would be 1 as well. Machine gun, if you're 3 or 4, get 1, and artillery. So in the case of that unit, he would get 4. Now the Russians, if heavy cover, and he's in a city. City, let me check real quick. Cities give you medium cover. So he wouldn't get heavy cover bonus, and the elevation, he would get an elevation bonus. So we get -1 hit. So he would still take 3 hits. He's only got 1 step, so he would be destroyed. And then the unit would be able to move into that, and that would be assault combat. There's a little bit more to it. There's more nuance than just that, but that is pretty much the gist of it. Other things, talking about reinforcements, since we would be going to a new turn, you would pull all the markers off, and then your reinforcements here in the magazine, which contains the rules, of course. Here you can see German reinforcements. So you place these units directly onto the game turn track, which I did, right? So in game turn 2, the 35th Reserve would go to, I think that's Deutsche Eylau. And then on the next page is the Russian. Whoa, I just wrecked the board because I almost dropped it. This is like the next to last page in the magazine. You see game turn 2, the 6th, 13th, 15th, 2nd of the 23rd, and the 2nd heavy artillery on any map edge hex from Lomya to Malava, or Malava. So Malava is over here, and Lomya is here. So any along here, this is the second army, of course, will be coming in. So that, and then you can, if it tells you specifically where to put them, like the Germans, the 35th Reserve, they go to Deutsche Eylau, they're right there. And then you would take these guys and you could put them out, anywhere you want down here, stack them, whatever you want. And that's how you would do your reinforcements. So, as is always the case, I don't get to do as much as I wanted to do with the game because I want to keep the time relatively short and tight. I know most people don't watch the entire video. If you have stuck it out to the end without cheating and skipping ahead, kudos to you. But that is going to do it for this one. So I will probably do a review of this at some point in the next few weeks. I don't know when. But this is a good game. It is also the same system that is used in Drive to the Sea, which is also in one of the Yaah issues. I believe it was an earlier issue. So one of the early issues. Most of the Yaah magazine issues are still available on the Flying Pig Games website, so check them out. This is issue 10, but there are others, many others. I think they're up to 15 or 16 now. And as I said, most of them are still available, so you can get yourself a good game and an interesting magazine. But that will do it. I'm going to stop talking now. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know, and I will do my best to reply. Thank you, as always, for watching. If you'd consider liking, sharing, and/or subscribing, that is always a very welcome thing from my end. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. Happy gaming.